Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net coming back at you with some more old school. And I keep getting requests for these old school game topics or franchises to keep talking about. I had some severe success with the Wolfenstein and Doom podcast. Heck, I even had a lot of people who say that they enjoyed the Mario podcast I did last. But this week we're going to be talking about a classic staple of the PC gaming industry, the old school PC gaming industry, and that's SiN by Ritual. Now, the SiN franchise was developed by Ritual Entertainment. It had multiple different publishers over the years. There was one single game released originally, an expansion pack, a animated feature that was direct to video, and single episodic game released. All in all, you got about 3 or 4 products there, depending upon what you would consider the episodic or the expansion pack to be, or the re-releases and things like that, if you consider an expansion pack to be a single product. So, what have we got here? Ritual was basically formed up by some then industry veterans like the Lev Lord and Tom Mustaine and people like that, who were guys who were pretty good in the trenches of video game development. They had worked on they worked on some projects previously and had gotten some fame to it. So they banded together and formed Ritual. The first game that they released was SiN. SiN, for those of you who don't know, follows a story in Freeport City of a main character named John Blade. He is tasked with his little hacker buddy named JC Armac with basically protecting Freeport City, which is in the future kind of like a combination between Los Angeles, New York, Tokyo, and basically things like that. It's like futuristic urban design. The main villain in this game is named Alexis Sinclair. She is the head of a multinational corporation with basically plans for world domination, of course. She has developed a mutagen that can be used as a bioweapon and basically plans to use her mutagenic creatures to take over the world, of course. However, while this may seem like a bit of a cookie cutter type storyline and things like that, the way Ritual was able to make the first game was definitely beyond what you would think of for that. I mean, if me describing that story to you may sound like, oh, that's a simple story. It's about a person with world domination plans and a hero and his sidekick that are trying to stop them. But if you played the game itself, you had something quite unique. Ritual brought something new to the table. This was the thing I always liked about Ritual. Ritual could take even the simplistic of stories and polish them so well. They could polish a game that was just basically a simple shooter and practically make it a candidate for Game of the Year. I don't know what they had about it. I don't know if it was maybe the increased level of interactivity, the continuous play testing, the level designs, I don't know. I just don't know. But Ritual could do it. They were great at it. I mean, let's go back to the beginning. I first became aware of SiN at the point when I had already had a PC game. I already had my first PC. SiN released the same day as Half-Life, the original Half-Life, came out. Now, that alone gave it some problems. Half-Life, of course, went on to be the groundbreaking game that everyone still talks about, but not too many people remember SiN. Even to this day, not too many people remember SiN. I even have to admit that most of my focus on the gaming industry at that time was all revolving around Quake. And so I wasn't really looking too closely at SiN. Heck, I wasn't even really looking too closely at Half-Life at that point, until years later. But what really brought me interested in SiN, the first exposure I had to SiN was when I saw the SiN anime on shelves. And I thought to myself, oh, this is based on a game. Haven't really seen that before, at least not at that point. I mean, DVD was still relatively new. I knew the Street Fighter. I know, looking back on it, the Street Fighter animes had already obviously been released by that point, at least in Japan. But I hadn't heard about them until years after that fact. I certainly had never seen any of them on shelves. But I saw the SiN anime on shelves and thought, oh, this is interesting that a game could branch out like that. I never picked it up, but I regretted not picking it up. And then my focus kind of shifted to other games. But I kind of kept my eye on Ritual because there was a lot that Ritual was doing years after the fact that were really interesting, that I liked a lot. I mean, one or two of them was obviously, I was a huge fan of, I think I really became interested in Ritual at around the time that they were working on Elite Force 2 in 2003. Um, like I said, I wasn't too following them too deeply, but I was a huge fan of the original Elite Force game that was made by published by Activision. It was made by Raven. When I mean, that game left it on a cliffhanger as far as I was concerned, and I was really looking forward to getting to play its sequel and to see what happened with the characters and what happened with with basically everything. I thought, you could do another one. And I admit, I was probably when I found out that they were making it, I was really stoked. And then I found out that Raven wasn't doing it; that Ritual was doing it. I was disappointed. And then I played Elite Force 2, and I wasn't disappointed at all. In fact, I loved the game. It was probably one of my favorite Star Trek games. I wouldn't say I liked it more than Elite Force 2, but I certainly liked it as much as Elite Force 2. I thought that Ritual brought a lot new to the table in presentation, in polish, in the secrets that they had, and the Easter eggs and everything. I really thought that was really cool. So that immediately made me almost like a Ritual fanboy overnight. And I was following really closely with what it was that they were working on. Now, anybody who became a Ritual fanboy or was exposed to the games of Ritual probably immediately became aware of SiN as like their big major release. And I will admit that that was probably my first exposure to SiN and seeing the game and hearing about it and things like that. And I thought, this is kind of an interesting game. But by that point, SiN was not on the shelves anymore. You really couldn't find it anywhere. It hadn't really been re-released, and I wouldn't say this was before Amazon or anything like that. But I certainly didn't have the money or the willpower to be to be basically scouring around eBay or Amazon for new copies. I would have liked to have, but I just didn't do that. And I probably regret that. So I started becoming interested in the stuff that Ritual was doing, and I started following the development of the new teasing that they were doing for a SiN sequel. The Level Lord over time had his own website, and it was basically like an early blog. It wasn't an early blog; it was a blog, but it was like one of the first blogs, really, as far as I can think of. And he posts stories, and many of them are stories that you just think, wow, wow, I can't believe he posted that. But he would post some, in some cases, pretty raunchy stories. And and it's just amazing to hear, some of the personal, it made the game. I mean, I was still young at the time, and I was kind of always considering like these game developers as like super celebrities and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my God, you're totally famous. That is amazing. I can't believe I can't believe you made it. You made an awesome game. I kind of almost consider these guys like rock stars. When they started a blog, and obviously years later, as I started meeting them, here they were, just regular guys, I've never met the Lev Lord or anybody from Ritual, but I've met my share of game developers and stuff like that. They're just normal people like you or me. I know that kind of sounds surprising when they probably, some of them, certainly the ones I met. I mean, I met the guy who was the owner of Gearbox, for example. He's probably got millions and billions of dollars, and he was just some regular guy, So yeah, this is kind of interesting it was, so I was a big fan of the Level Lord's website, and he was posting up some of the first screenshots of what he thought was going to be SiN 2, or what was looking to be SiN 2. Well, that never really took off. But then something happened. Ritual was interested in doing a SiN sequel. And what basically happened was that up until about 2004 or so, um, one of their competitors, or if you think about it, Valve Software was was on the forefront of releasing something quite groundbreaking. In 2003, Valve released Steam. What was Steam? Well, everyone knows what Steam is now, but Steam was basically proposed to be like a content distribution system. And Valve was designing it to basically use it as a way to sell their games online. Now, I know what you're saying. This was 2003. Everyone does that nowadays. Well, Valve was, on the forefront of something, because they were doing more than just delivering the games. They were also providing a network infrastructure. They were providing a chatting infrastructure. They were basically providing an infrastructure for a lot of things beyond just what the game could do itself. And they were attaching it to their games. Obviously, I think I think their big test for it was the release of Counter-Strike 1.6. Counter-Strike 1.6 was released exclusively to the Steam service. Pretty much overnight, downloads for the Steam pretty much just shut down because they just couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it because everyone wanted Counter-Strike 1.6. What finally happened was that eventually Steam came into a more open beta version, and it allowed users to basically register their Half-Life CD keys to basically get Half-Life, Counter-Strike, and all the original Counter-Strike Half-Life expansions that Valve had developed, like Ricochet and stuff like that, and basically download them through the Steam service, and so they can play them online. Now, a lot of people kind of cried foul on this because everyone's like, "Well, I've got the game on disc anyway. Why should I have to download this game through a service and then have to be online all the time to play it?" How tastes have changed. But Valve, I got to admit, did offer some positives with Steam, and that was the continuous updating system and things like that. So it made basically having to hunt and download heavy patches. It got rid of that. I appreciated that about the system because I was always somebody who would always have to download stacks and stacks of patches to have the game always have my games at the latest versions, and I appreciate that Steam took care of that for me. I also was a person who was using things like instant messengers all the time, so constantly being online was nothing. And on top of that, having usernames and passwords and stuff like that was also nothing. So I didn't mind the Steam system anymore once it basically got to its Steam interface. Ritual took a look at this service and thought to themselves, I think we got something here. Ritual had been and the concept arts had already leaked, so we already not leaked, they were already released. So we already saw the renders for SiN 2. Ritual had been interested in making a sequel to SiN for a while. In fact, they had a few deals with some publishers about it. But in this day and age, you couldn't just negotiate with a publisher. The publisher was going to take it all from you. Publishers were like, look, we're the people that you have to go through in order to get the money that you need to have the financing for certain things. If you want financing from us, we're going to take a lot out of it. And that was, they wanted this SiN IP. Well, Ritual just wasn't interested in giving that up. Valve, on the other hand, looked to be an interesting publisher. Here you had something that was going to be released exclusively online. And the idea was that Valve certainly wasn't interested in the intellectual property of SiN. They basically were like, their cut was is like, okay, you give us a cut of every sale. That's basic. That was Valve's. That was Valve's, and that still is to their to this day. When it comes to internet distribution, you give a cut. Basically, the online retailers basically get a cut of every sale. That's how it is. I mean, it's the rare thing that that is interested completely in taking your IP and all this other stuff for in exchange for publishing rights. However, you could I believe that you could pay Valve a good amount of money to do so. I think I heard some people were basically saying that it did cost some money to get on Valve's to get on the Steam system. I don't know if those policies had changed, but Valve did, I think back then Valve basically were like, okay, if you want to be on our service, you have to pay a few dollars. Basically, I don't know how much. But I think that nowadays that policy might have changed because it seemed like nowadays online retailers were interested in taking just a cut of every sale. So, what does that say about Ritual? Ritual decided that what they were going to do with this was finally basically go into the business of making SiN games. And this is when I got very interested. Valve was on the forefront, and so was Ritual, about a whole new distribution system. What to do with this? Well, they had two options. You could release full-price retail games, cut out retail completely, and release the game exclusively through the service and charge full price for it. Valve, basically being the people that are releasing the games themselves, got a 100% cut of all of the games that they released themselves. Ritual would also get, for their own games, would get a pretty good cut. Probably higher than what they would get in retail, but maybe not, I don't know. But it was certainly something that interested Ritual a lot. So this is what happened. They were putting their weight behind Steam. And SiN, since they own the IP, and probably the game itself, and the rights to the first game certainly, they could do what they wanted with it. And they figured the Steam store was pretty sparse at the time. I believe at the time there was only like 2 or 3 different games on the service. There was obviously the Valve games were all on there, and Mark Healy's Ragdoll Kung Fu was on there, and I think Darwinia was on its way over, but it wasn't yet out at the time. So Ritual decided, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create pretty much a whole new distribution system. We are going to pretty much upend what you can do with a video game release. Instead of releasing one full-price game and release it for full prices, we're going to do. We're going to develop the tools to make a full game and release a game in sections that could be played episodically. We'll cut the game up, we'll release them part after part after part, and what we'll do with that is that we'll charge for each individual episode. Therefore, each user paying for the episode that is out or the episodes that are out will basically be funding the later developments of later episodes. So that's what happened. That's what they thought. So they put their weight behind Steam. They ported the first SiN game over to the Steam system and updated it a little bit, and started development of of the first episode of the SiN episode series called Emergence. This was going to be a sequel to SiN. This was going to be it. And basically they said, if you add up all the episodes, you're going to get yourself a sequel to SiN. And they promised that later things would be happening. They said first off that SiN was going to be coming to Steam for purchase. They also said that eventually Wages of SiN was going to come as well. And that was or possibly they were going to port SiN over to the Source engine, which is the Half-Life 2's engine. And basically allow it to be playable on the new stuff. So this piqued me because I was always a person who was really interested in when a developer was going to do something revolutionary. It's the same reason I was interested in Sanity Icons Artifact years and years ago. Nobody remembers that game. Um, but I guess the fact that Ritual was willing to do this, on top of that, I was a huge fan of Elite Force 2. I was a huge fan of the Counter Strike Condition Zero deleted scenes, which they had also worked on. That was all something to me. That I was like, okay, Ritual has my money. I'm this thing that they're working on is interesting me. I can't wait to play it. So time progresses, and they were working on the SiN episodes. In fact, this was considered to be like Valve put them out there, and they were putting themselves out there as like there was almost like a symbiosis between Ritual and Valve for this because Valve kind of maybe thought, if we sell that we can do this with our service, that's selling our service, and that's also, of course, if they sell they sell their game, we do well because that sells our service. Ritual wanted to sell their game, and if that meant promoting the Valve service, that was great too. I mean, in the past, companies had done this before. I remember Freedom Force, the Third Reich, was heavily supported by. Which was developed by Irrational Games, was heavily supported by BioWare. I know. BioWare was doing a lot of promotion for Freedom Force versus the Third Reich. Rightfully so. It was a good game. So there was that. So they said to people who played or pre-ordered the SiN Episode 1, they finally came up with a price point. The episode was going to cost $20. Now, I had theorized at the time when I was doing the math, a lot of people were kind of mad at this price point, and I'll tell you why. Because the episodic games hadn't really come out yet, there was no definitive price point for what they could release it at. But a lot of the developers were basically saying, we're going to do this like, they're not going to be full price. We're probably going to do them like a sub $20 price point. So people were kind of thinking maybe it was going to be about $10 to $15, depending upon how long the game took to beat. And people kind of thought, well, a $10 to $15 price point. Again, remember, this was pre Xbox Live. This was pre a lot of stuff. So the development process was only there for either full games or small games that were like, mini games and stuff like that. There was nothing like this released yet. Nobody had seen anything like this. I had theorized to the Ritual guys, I don't know if I ever told them this, but this is what I had theorized. That what they should have done was they should have chosen to do two things. One, do a normal price point per episode. Like just charge people per episode. That was fine. But the second thing I said they should have done was they should have released the games, had released like a season pass or something like that. I guess we would call that now. Or I would have said like a bundle ticket. And what that would do was you'd pay a little bit more, like maybe the price of 2 or 3 games total, like $50 or $60 or something like that. But you'd have all of the episodes guaranteed to you, or half a season, or something like that. I think the original design was that they were going to do 9 episodes total for the SiN episodes, and I think they were talking about releasing them in series of 3s. So that if they were to do like a season pass or something, you'd get a season pass for like 3 episodes. And I figured if you did the math out, but you charged users slightly less than what 3 episodes would cost, and as long as you guaranteed them all of the episodes when they came out, people wouldn't have a problem paying like, let's say, $40 or something for 3 episodes. It wouldn't be much of it. I thought that was kind of fair, like $39.95 or something like that. Well, Ritual didn't do that. Ritual only had the price point for the 1 episode at $20. And Valve put in a good word with them, I guess, or they must have worked out a deal with EA to have a box published, have a game box published. So you basically had Valve helping out Ritual. And you had the Steam, so you had the Steam release, but you also had the retail release, and to basically satisfy pre-orders, Ritual gave the first SiN game, in its entirety, not including Wages of Sin, but the first SiN game to pre-orders. So if you bought the SiN episodes in pre-order, it would unlock the first SiN game. So people who hadn't played it or would play it could have a chance to play it before they played SiN episode 1. So I was one of the first pre-orders for the SiN episodes. When they started taking pre-orders through Steam, I plunked down my credit card and I immediately I took the charge for $20 straight to Valve. I hope Ritual got their cut. And I downloaded through Steam the SiN game, which I hadn't played before, the full SiN game, and I started playing it. And let me tell you something. I loved every second of playing the first SiN game. I don't know what it was. I thought it had a really fun. I don't know. I just thought that there was just something fun about it. I don't know if it was the humor, how much I like JC Armac or something like that. You know, John Blade's little buddy, or the humor that was between them, or if I thought the story was perfect here. I mean, there were a few things that were going for it. One was the interactivity, and you could tell it in the very first level. When you were messing around with things like the computer systems for hacking, and there was no point to doing this, but there were ATMs in the game that you could mess around with and get things like you could enter a pin number 12345, and it would tell you, "Hello, President Scroob, how are you doing?" Just things like that. I mean, it worked well. I enjoyed it. As I played through the levels, I mean, here was somebody that I had played a lot of these games, and I had really seen, even though it seemed kind of like a simple design, I had seen nothing like it. I mean, it had some rail segments, it had some non-rail segments, it had its interactivity levels, it had a few secrets here and there, it had cutscenes, it had bonus missions. Bonus objectives. It had a great, great villain. I don't know what to say about Alexis Sinclair. I really don't. I think that she was what really made the game. Because here you had a game when pretty much you have video games. They're gonna have a villain, just like in movies you have a villain. But you never really had seen a villain like Alexis Sinclair like that before. The femme fatale incarnate. Here was a woman that was driven, intelligent, beautiful, and completely, how do I put this? Driven to her goals. And she wasn't afraid to use whatever means she had at her disposal to get what she wanted. Whether it be her looks, whether it be her brains, whether it be her money, whether it be her resources. She was going to use whatever it takes to take over the world, of course. So that's what I really liked about her. I really did. And I like John Blade because he was like the antithesis of that. He was the guy who was, in a lot of ways, a stereotypical hero. The stereotypical hero, the big burly guy with a weapon. But he was the guy who had a sidekick. He wasn't alone. He wasn't doing this stuff alone. He had JC with him. JC was the opposite of Blade. He was scrawny. He didn't go really directly on missions with Blade, at least not in the game. And he was able to do what Blade needed him to do. He was able to get through systems. He was able to provide exposition. He was able to help Blade achieve his goals in taking down Alexis. Now, at the end, there was a lot of great scenes too. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is when they find a mutant in the and Blade their first mutant that they find in the game, and Blade destroys it, and JC starts talking to Blade about what when they're doing the initial look at it. JC tells Blade to tell the cops on the scene to check his ovaries, and Blade says, "Yo, Hadwin, Mueller, check his ovaries." Wait, what? I don't know who wrote that, but I love you for it. That was a great line. That was great. And then in the later scene, JC talks about how he did an autopsy, and I'm like, wait, what? They let a kid do an autopsy. That's awesome. I mean, if they let a kid do an autopsy like that, obviously the kid would have to have known his stuff. You know, to have that kind of respect that somebody would have let him just do an autopsy. That was pretty cool, and I liked that about it. So I make it to the end of SiN. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I like the fact that it had branching pathways in some levels where there were alternate levels to play, and I'd seen that before in like flight sims and stuff like that, but I hadn't really seen that before in first person shooters. Occasionally there might be a special mission or a bonus mission, but I hadn't really seen that before with branching pathways and for multiple objectives and stuff like that. I hadn't really seen that, and I liked it. I thought it was really cool. Most times in the games when I played, you basically play through the levels and that's it. You play through the levels, from level to level, set piece to set piece. No deviation in your path. Maybe some exploration, but no deviation. So there's that. What happened? Finally get to the end of the game. We fight the big baddie, and Blade goes up against Alexis. Spoilers. She does something to distract Blade. I won't go into what. You can probably look it up online or play the game. Blade gets distracted, and Alexis gets away. So, cliffhanger. I'm ready to play the SiN episodes now. I'm really ready to play the SiN episodes now. And I'm really looking forward to it. So this is what happened. The SiN episode games start looking up to getting released. And what finally happens is that I think they were planning on releasing it on like, I don't know, May 10th or something like that in 2006 at like 10 a.m. or something like that. I think that was when they were planning on doing it. I missed a class. I couldn't care. I couldn't have cared less to even go to class. I was going to play this game. That was more important to me. Priorities, right? So I missed a class, and I'm waiting for the game to unlock, and it didn't. It took 30 extra minutes for the game to unlock. I think it was like the first time ever that Steam was behind on a release. They later determined that their system clocks on some of their servers were behind. And because of that, the content servers, I'm sure they fixed the problem, certainly. But they did say that the content servers, that the internal clocks were off by either the 30 minutes or they were behind, basically. But the game's pretty much phased in at around, I don't know, 30 minutes after the release, like around 10:30 or so. So I'm a half hour behind, and I start playing the game. Now, I had followed some of the game development a lot. The game had a showing at CES. The game had a showing at E3 the past year. I'm really, I'm like looking closely at this one, and it's it's beautiful. The graphics were great. It did a lot that Valve hadn't been able to do. It enhanced the Valve engine in a lot of ways. Um, it allowed destructible cars and things like that, which we hadn't really seen before. It had some fantastic graphics. It really showed off the Source engine. It pushed the Source engine. Obviously, the Source engine had been updated since Half-Life 2, but we really hadn't seen Half-Life pushed in this way. We hadn't really seen that engine pushed in this way. Half-Life 2 Episode 1 hadn't come out yet. So I was just thinking the whole time, what a ride, what a ride, what a ride. It had Dope Fish, which was a great Easter egg to my PC gaming roots pedigree. I love the Dope Fish. I mean, the Dope Fish started in case you guys are curious what those fish are in the game if you've played it. The Dope Fish was something that was created for Commander Keen. It has a pedigree in basically that it makes an appearance even in modern games. Alan Wake had Dope Fish, for example. The original Max Payne had Dope Fish. Every once in a while, that a Dope Fish will appear in a game that was influenced either by 3D Realms, id Software, or developers of those studios, like individual guys. It appeared in Anachronox. I think 3 Dopfish actually appeared in Anachronox. So there were, yeah, there was that. So I liked that. So I'm playing through the whole game, and I'm like, let's it starts off with one heck of a bang. We're introduced to Victor Raddick. Alexis Sinclair is back. She's alive. She has you in her clutches, and you break out because this new character comes in named Jessica who breaks you out, and it's awesome. And you get out together, but she's done something. Alexis did something to you. We don't know what it is. She might be turning you into a mutant. We don't know. She did something to you in a hot tub. We don't know what that is. Um, so a lot's going on. They really opened up on They had a great opening, and then it was basically balls to the wall action as the game progressed. Fantastic. We get to the midway through the game, and there's a boss fight. Defeat the boss. And then the game gets hard because it starts introducing the rocket, the chain gun enemy. Now, for those of you who don't know, there were only 3 weapons in the first game, in SiN Episode 1. There was the pistol, there was the shotgun, and there was the assault rifle. And the game gave you each new weapon very slowly. That was it. There were no rocket launchers. There was nothing like that. They said that new weapons were going to be coming in later episodes, but they wanted to keep the game design for the first episode simple, so they kept it to a single-shot pistol with an anti-gin secondary round. So basically, all the weapons had secondary rounds as well. So they kind of considered it's technically like 6 weapons because you basically do that, but a lot of people, I'm sure, were kind of hoping that there'd be a rocket launcher. The first SiN game had a lot of weapons, had a wide diversity of weapons. And so there was that. So you beat the mid-game boss, and we're starting to get some information about just what happened. You break you start to okay, let's start tearing up some of Raddick's territory and some of Raddick's labs, and kind of hoping that maybe either they'll give us some answers or something. All we know though is that this was Jessica's idea, the new character, and JC, who was usually the guy who was like plunge headfirst into danger, was the person trying to act as the voice of reason, actually saying stuff like Jessica. So it's just Jessica, you're endangering his life. You have no warrant. You don't have anything, and he was right, of course. But it's kind of funny that JC had matured, that they were showing that the characters had matured since the first game. So that was interesting. Midway through the game, we find out that Alexis makes an appearance. She says she did not inject you with mutagen. She injected you with something else. We don't know what, and she never says, except that it's pretty powerful. Yeah. Gets towards the end of the game, and basically they're like, we're going to attack Alexis Sinclair's main building. We're going to attack the SiNTech building. And we're just going to do it head on, and maybe and hope for the best. So they do. They go through the underground, and they head directly to Alexis's main building, or one of her main offices. They break in. A lot of guards there. And before the first patch, those guards took forever to take down. A lot of time to take down. So yeah. So they had it up to the first patch. And let me tell you, some of that really slowed me down because those chain gun enemies did a lot of damage. Let me tell you, I was mapping the quick save. Quick save, quick save, quick save, quick load. And we start scaling in. Jessica and John Blade start scaling the building. We find out more, but not a lot. Just that she's probably going to harm Jessica over this. Alexis is going to harm Jessica. We make it to the top of the building. Raddick takes Jessica hostage, injects her with what is likely mutagen. We don't know, except it's likely different than what the Alexis injected into you. The vial that was injected into you was a blue liquid and Alexis did not say that that was mutagen. In fact, she said it wasn't mutagen. But the what Jessica was injected with was green. It was different. It probably was mutagen. And Radix starts saying, "I have, this, I have that, as like you trying to take, pull this data. I've got 6 more labs and stuff like that." You make it to the top of the building. You have to take out another boss, which is annoying, and then take out a helicopter. Trust me on this. With just the pistol, shotgun, and assault rifle, taking out this helicopter was an exercise in annoyance. It took forever. What I would have killed for a rocket launcher in that sequence. I guess they wanted to prolong it a bit, but really, just give me a rocket launcher. But it was a good ending. The helicopter crashes, and one of Hardcore's vehicles show up to pick you up. We then see a teaser for what's coming in the next episodes with JC talking. JC says, we didn't get a lot of information, but we did get some information. There's been a mutant attack on the city. It's under martial law, and it ends with Alexis laughing. And that's all we know about the second episode. The credits start to roll. We hear the music. The music was very good. Zach Bellica did a great job on the music. In fact, I actually bought the CD. I actually bought the CD physically from when they were selling it, so I'm actually grateful about that one. I actually enjoyed the music that much. And that was the end of the game. It ended with, and what they did, I thought it was pretty funny. They included the bloopers, the audio bloopers at the very end, so you could hear Jen Taylor and oh gosh, who else? The guy who does the voice of Sergeant Johnson. He was in the game. He also did the voice of Radek. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the Sergeant Johnson guy. He did multiple voices in the game, and he did a great job. and trust me, they have a great sense of humor. They really do. And yeah, that was a great moment. And here I am. I'm stoked for a second episode. And time progresses, and they're starting to talk about a second episode, but weird things started to happen to the SiN Episodes website. The SiN Episodes website originally said that it was going to have 9 episodes to it. Then, practically almost overnight, it went from 9 episodes to just 2 episodes on their website. They then started to say stuff like what they were planning on doing with the episodes themselves. Like, they said they were going to bring in like a combat zone that was in development already with the release of pre-release of the game. They already were working on this whole system on a score system. In fact, they demoed it at E3 2005. They also said that more stuff was going to be coming. Some people were disappointed in the fact that Blade didn't talk that much in the game. They explained this was for story reasons because of Blade's condition. He probably wouldn't be in a chatty mood. But they did say that they were going to be patching in Blade banter, and you could use a slider to adjust this, just so you could hear Blade in the episode again. They also said multiplayer was going to be coming. A lot of people also complained about the difficulty spike after the midpoint. They said they'd fix that. They realized that that was a bug, and that they were going to fix that. They also provided no answers to a lot of the stuff that was going on in the game. If you actually paid close attention to some of the stuff in the game itself, you noticed a few things. Like in the SiNTech offices, you noticed that they had Jessica Cannon's, resume. Was she a double agent or something like that? Why would they have her resume? They also had stuff on Blade's mother for some odd reason. We never found out anything about that. So there was a lot going on. A lot of questions that were left unanswered. What was Blade injected with? What was Jessica injected with? Was Radek dead? What was Alexis's plan? Could she be stopped? How far did this go? 9 episodes is quite interesting. I was stoked. I was stoked as heck for a second episode. You couldn't... I was willing to give them my money tenfold. I was willing to buy every single episode And they were talking about, oh, great things are coming. They released a patch to fix the mid game difficulty spike. They fixed that. They tweaked it a bit. They also had a bug or something like that with the midpoint of the game. There was a transition trigger or something like that that wasn't triggering all the time. I didn't have a problem with it, but some people did. And they fixed that one. And they released the scored combat zone. So you could play in multiple different maps. I think they also released like a second map pack or something like that for it as well. So things were looking up. They still had promised more stuff. The multiplayer was going to be coming. They also said they were going to be releasing patches for the original SiN game. They were going to be bringing in widescreen support. And then bad things started to happen. Really bad things started to happen. We were all thinking to ourselves, well, what's going to be happening with these later episodes? People started getting fired from Ritual or leaving Ritual. Not a good sign at all. Not a good sign at all. There was some other stuff that was going on internally. Things started going quiet on the SiN episodes front. And people were asking, well, what's going on here? What's going on with episode 2? Are we going to get episode 2? And nobody was saying anything at all. Nobody said it was dead or that they were stopping working on it, but nobody said anything. Everybody kept quiet. And more people started leaving Ritual. And they said they couldn't say why they left or they couldn't say why they were fired. But these were not just some normal people. These were some of the head developers and stuff like that. These were like the game directors and stuff were leaving. And then we found out why. Ritual could not pay their bills. What had happened was that the episodic structure was not what they thought it was going to be. The original payments for SiN episodes were not working out for them. Because what had happened was, because they had released their game completely independent of the system, retailers, when it came to retail, didn't know what to make of the games. They thought that this was shovelware or value software. And when they were giving MSRPs of $20 or something like that for the games, the actual cost of them were probably, they were selling them day and date retail for like $10, thinking that this was shovelware. They had no idea about the episodic system that was going on. All they think is like, oh, there's a new game coming out. The MSRP on it is $20. It's shovelware. Buy a lot of it and charge $10 for it at launch, basically. They had no idea. They had to be educated, as they said, on the episodic structure, and I don't think it really worked. The other thing was the games, as far as I was concerned, as I was saying before the release of the game, I don't think they charged enough for the game. And I know what I'm saying. It's like, well, $20 is a lot for an episodic game, and you're right. But what I said they should have done was, and they didn't do this, they should have done a season pass. This is what Telltale does. Telltale did this. Telltale released a season pass so that you could buy The Walking Dead, for example, an individual episode, or you could buy the whole season and then get the new episodes as they were coming out. So that's pretty much what they were doing since the days of the first episode of Sam and Max, for example. You could buy, you could pay a certain amount of money for every specific episode of Sam and Max, or you could pay a lump sum, get all the episodes the day and date that they came out, and in some cases maybe a little bit earlier. They sometimes sometimes emailed their clients about the games coming out a bit early, and giving them download codes for it. And then said, okay, all you gotta do is just wait for the DVD release and pay shipping and handling on the DVD release, and we'll give you the DVD, no extra charge other than just the shipping and handling. So they were doing a really good thing. You could pay, they were saying you could pay $9 a piece for each individual episode, or you could pay $40, get all the episodes the day they came out, and they never stopped that. So as the games kept getting released, you could still pay that $40 and get all the episodes, and then get the DVD release at the very end of the season with bonus special features and stuff like that. That's what Telltale did. And Telltale, actually, as far as I'm concerned, was the only survivors of the episodic wars, of the episodic trend. Other game developers tried doing it. Valve was heavily inspired by the SiN episodes to do that, and of course, we all know what happened with that. They released the first episode individually. It might have suffered the same fate as the SiN episodes. I don't know. I think the only reason that Valve was able to survive it was because they were Valve. But there were serious problems with it. They didn't dare release a standalone product for when episode 2 came out. They released a full product. They released the orange box when episode 2 came out. They were going to do twofold and actually have, because I think that they were going to do they did 3 new games for episode 2. They didn't have to do this. They could have just released episode 2 by itself. But they decided what they were going to do was release episode 2 along with 2 new games. Team Fortress 2, which had been long anticipated by that point. Nobody had any idea that was even going to come out at all. And what was the other thing? And Portal, the first Portal game. And they were going to call it like the black box or something like that. So the PC users who basically had already had episode 1 and the original Half-Life would buy the black box, and everybody else would buy on the consoles, because they were doing a console release. We're going to release the orange box. Well, the black box got canceled shortly before the release, and the only thing that you could buy was the orange box. So you basically had 2 old games and 3 new ones and a full retail price, which was $50. Well, or $60 on the consoles. Well, yeah. We all know how that went. They said that episode 3 was going to be coming, and we haven't seen it. That was 2007. We have not heard anything about Half-Life 2 episode 3 or Half-Life 3 since release of episode 2. That's all is to say that the episodic experiment was a failure. The only thing, as far as I'm concerned, that kept Telltale afloat was the fact that they actually did the full price point at launch with their products. I think that's what did so well for them, and I got to give them props for that. That plus they had some good games too. But then again, I like the SiN episodes a lot, and I thought it was a very good game. I thought Half-Life 2 Episode 1 was really good. I don't know. Maybe with the time it would take for that kind of development cycle, I guess maybe they just realized we can't release at that price point. We just can't. We have to have a full game at a full price point. Otherwise, and what Ritual basically said was, we had enough to cover our fundings. We had enough to cover the cost of development. We paid our bills. The problem was, with the sales that we had enough to pay our bills for the investment it cost for the first episode, but we did not have enough money for sustaining any further episode development. And that's what happened to Ritual. And Ritual basically with no other option sold their company. They sold to Mumbo Jumbo, who was basically interested in, I guess, expanding themselves or whatever. I guess there were some of the Ritual guys that knew Mumbo Jumbo or something like that. And Ritual was basically gutted, I'm sure, by Mumbo Jumbo. You could say Ritual technically still exists, but it doesn't, really. As far as I'm concerned, Mumbo Jumbo pretty much just absorbed them. Because we have not heard a peep from anything that Ritual has worked on. We've heard plenty of stuff from Mumbo Jumbo. Mumbo Jumbo's releasing this, Mumbo Jumbo's releasing that, but they're just continuing to do what they've always done. Mumbo Jumbo now basically owns SiN. They own SiN. They can do whatever they want with it, I'm sure. Maybe they're choosing that they're going to do nothing with it, because Half-Life 2 Episode 1 came out in 2006. Since then, there has been no talk of Episode 2, or any further SiN episodes, or a SiN sequel. Which is extremely, extremely depressing and disheartening. I have to say that that was probably one of the saddest things I can think of. One of the last saddest things I can think of prior to that was probably when Troika disbanded after Vampire Bloodlines. I was really looking forward to Vampire Bloodlines. I played Vampire Bloodlines. I liked it a lot. It was one of my staple games of the summer. And Troika pretty much just disseminated after that. I was kind of hoping that at some point they were going to make a sequel to Vampire Bloodlines, because I was a huge fan of it. Or at the very least make something else, but they didn't. Troika unfortunately did not. I don't know. maybe someday with this was pre Kickstarter. This was pre all of that stuff. Maybe if Ritual had had the opportunity to do Kickstarter or something like that, to fund the later SiN episodes, that would have maybe helped them out a bit, because like I said, I was a huge fan of the SiN episodes. The only people who hated the SiN episodes were the pirates, because for some odd reason, remember that bug I was talking about, the one that was like the game breaker midway through the game? Even though they fixed that bug and there wasn't a problem with it in retail versions, apparently it broke the pirated versions of the game. And even today, I think the pirated versions don't work or something like that because of that game breaker bug. So apparently, like, I don't know, I love the game. I can think of a lot of people that probably liked it a lot. I really want to see a sequel. I really did. Um, it's really sad that that's where it ended. So as a SiN fan, I felt like there was like one thing that I needed to do. And that was I needed to get myself the SiN anime. I needed to somehow find the SiN anime. Now, the SiN anime had been out of print by that point. I think this was like 2006, 2007 or so. The SiN anime originally released in 2000. I had heard musings that the SiN anime had gotten re-released as like a special edition, although the original release was a special edition, which was bundled with the soundtrack or something. And that had happened in 2005. Goofy me wasn't willing to spend, I don't know, $20 on it. I kind of maybe was kind of hoping that it would lower in price. Well, it took me forever at that point. I was like, I don't care how much it costs, I'm gonna get this stupid thing if it's the last thing I do. And goofball me went through like online retailer to online retailer to online retailer. Heck, even Amazon didn't have it at the time. And I found a copy, and I got it. I think it was like one of the last copies that they had. And I bought it online, and it got shipped to me, and I watched it. And I watched it with full well knowing that this is probably going to be the last thing I ever see in the SiN series. I was really impressed by the animation. I thought the animation was really good. I think it was the first movie ADV Films ever produced, the now defunct ADV Films. It was like the first thing they ever produced themselves. But I thought the animation was great. I liked the story a lot. They basically, in case you haven't seen SiN the movie is an adaptation of the first SiN game. They took some creative liberties with it, and it's no longer considered canonical. In fact, it wasn't considered canonical when it was first released, because they changed a lot. The canonical part of the SiN story was basically the first SiN game. I guess Wages of SiN is still considered canonical, and the SiN episodes are considered canonical. The SiN episodes do not, because JC is still alive in the first SiN episode. Yeah, the JC died actually in one of the first scenes in SiN the movie, and was replaced by, I guess, his sister or something like that, who was also called JC. It took some creative liberties, but I thought it was a pretty good adaptation of the original SiN movie. I like the animation. I like the character designs. I wish there were two things that I wish they had done, and that was I wish they had used the original voice actors for the original game. They didn't do that. Obviously, nowadays that's not done. I can, even with like games that are considered canonical, have canonical adaptations for movies and stuff like that. Like when Dead Space did the Dead Space Down. I don't even remember what the Dead Space movie was called. But the yeah, when the Dead Space movie was released, the first animated Dead Space game, which was released, I guess, day and date with the Dead Space video game, the first Dead Space game, it didn't even have the same voice actors, I don't think. So yeah, that happened. But that having been said, I did enjoy it as a SiN fan. But what I enjoyed more was all the bonus features, because you had interviews with a lot of the SiN game developers, like the Lev Lord and a few other people, the game's voice actor or the movie's voice actors, and I'm just watching this like these guys are talking about how enthusiastic they are about the SiN property and where this is going to go, and what's going to be going on with the SiN property in years. And I'm watching this in 2007 when Ritual is now part of Mumbo Jumbo, and a lot of these guys are doing other stuff, and we haven't heard from the SiN episodes. If you can track the game down, obviously you can purchase the game on Steam, no problem. You might have a problem running the original SiN game, even the Steam version. on a 64-bit version of Windows. I haven't been able to get it to work. Obviously, 32-bit probably will be able to work fine. SiN episodes also will probably be able to work just fine too. Even on a 64-bit system, it was using the Source engine. It should work just fine. Yeah. Sorry I got to end this thing with honestly a sour note, but I really hope that Mumbo Jumbo or someone else would do this. I was thinking like in nowadays, what could be done with the property, and I remember when the iPhone first came out and stuff like that, and the processing power that was under the hood of like the second or third generation iPods, iPod Touch or iPhones, and I was thinking to myself, there's enough hardware in there. They could run SiN, they could release SiN on it. Why doesn't Mumbo Jumbo just port SiN over to the iPhone or something? That'd be kind of cool to say that they were still interested in doing something with a property. If you guys have heard any behind the scenes things, post a comment about it. I know that the guy, one of the head testers of the game, he calls himself Romsteady. I forget what his real name is. But he was talking about something like, he was giving like riddles and stuff like that about what was going to be going on with later SiN episodes. And as far as I know, no plot synopsis ever was released. But I think that what they were planning on doing was that in the game itself, or at least in the SiN episode, the first SiN episode, that Alexis always wore something around her neck. And I think that that was supposed to represent something important later on in the series or something. I don't have a confirmation on that, but based upon what I read from Romsteady's riddles, I think that that was what he was talking about. Like that thing around Alexis's neck in the episodes was supposed to be something important. Well, you never know. So that's my talk on SiN, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a bit of a downer, but you know what? Maybe if you're optimistic, someday Mumbo Jumbo might decide to do something with it. Or the guys from Ritual might decide to get the rights back. You never know. I sure would love to play an episode 2. I really would. So until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Have a nice night, guys. Over and out.